Well, is Russia getting more money secure? Is Iran getting more money, making us more secure? Yes or no?
All right. In the first administration,
yes or no?
this president was able to get peace deals in the Middle East.
We're talking about now.
Everybody keeps asking the same question right now. How did this situation spiral so fast? And why does the defense of it sound so shaky the moment it gets challenged? Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because what you're about to see isn't just another political debate, it's a full-on collision between two completely different versions of reality. On one side, you've got Adam Mockler stepping into a high-pressure panel, fully aware he's walking into a room that isn't exactly friendly territory. And on the other side, a lineup of familiar political voices, including Hogan Gidley, a figure who's built a reputation for defending just about anything thrown his way, no matter how hard it is to justify. And this isn't some casual back and forth. The stakes here are bigger than talking points. We're dealing with war, global stability, and decisions that affect millions of people. And yet the arguments coming from one side sound like they were stitched together to hold a narrative, not to explain reality. You've also got seasoned political figures and commentators sitting in, each bringing their own angle, their own biases, and their own pressure into the discussion. But what makes this exchange different is that Mockler doesn't play along. He doesn't soften his position to keep things comfortable. Instead, he leans directly into the tension. And what follows is exactly what you'd expect when someone starts pulling at the threads of a carefully constructed political defense. Things begin to unravel fast. So let's break down what actually happened in this exchange, piece by piece.
War with Iran is entering its fourth week, and new strikes rock Tehran. President Trump's words and the Pentagon's actions aren't quite matching up. Tonight, Trump says that he's considering winding down military efforts in the Middle East as the U.S. gets closer to meeting its goals. But Iran claims there's no indication of that. And by the looks of it, the U.S. actually appears to be ramping up its mission. Sources tell CNN that thousands more Marines and soldiers are deploying to the region from the West Coast, with some set to arrive in the coming weeks. In total, we could see at least 5,000 troops there. The White House has been scrambling to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the critical shipping passage that's been paralyzed for weeks now. And there's one potential solution, which is taking over Iran's economic lifeline, Karg Island. That's something that officials have privately weighed as a way to force Iran to back off of the strait. But now, as we wait for all of this to play out in the weeks and months ahead, Trump, tonight, is declaring victory.
Oh, I think we've won. We've knocked out their Navy, their Air Force. We've knocked out their anti-aircraft. We've knocked out everything. We're roaming free. From a military standpoint, all they're doing is clogging up the strait. But from a military standpoint, they're finished.
He says they're finished. He says we're winding down. And Margaret, your experience in the military, I mean, when you hear all the seemingly conflicting things, what do you think is really going on here?
Well, I have two thoughts on that. First is that just getting into a war like this is why it's important when the framers created the Constitution that they vested the power to declare a war in Article 1. Article 1 addresses the legislator. And that was important to the founders because they wanted to make sure that people could enter war through their elected representatives. And here's why. They want to know a plan. They want to know why we should go to war. And that process should happen through people's individual elected representatives. So that's my first thought, is that we have no information because there's one person making all of the decisions and nobody knew about this. Nobody was briefed on it. Nobody was consulted for a plan. My second thought on this is just my own perspective from being in Iraq in 2016. And I've been on your show before. We've talked about during airstrikes. And I was in Iraq in 2016, 5 years after the United States had left Iraq. In 2011, President Obama at that point made the choice to withdraw. In the time frame between 2011 and 2014, a group called the Islamic State took over Iraq and Syria. And by 2014, they were about to seize the Baghdad airport. So we had to make the decision, the U.S. had to make the decision to go back into Iraq. And so in 2016, facing the Islamic State, when I was there, I was actually working alongside commanders, generals, who were my people that I was with in the strike cell, who were now partnered with Iraqi National Army generals. Okay, so consider that perspective. These are the people that during the 2003 invasion, these American commanders had actually been fighting. They were targeting. And yet in 2016, because we didn't properly plan, in my opinion, and we left this country basically to an ungoverned populace that was sort of wreaked with war, the result is that in 2016, you had the Iraqi National Army and the United States partnered together in order to try to root out a very dangerous organization.
And a new danger that perhaps was not anticipated at the beginning. That, I guess, is always the possibility here. I mean, there are lots of possibilities, including unintended consequences, if we do decide, as the president seems to suggest, that, okay, we have these limited objectives, they're met up until a certain point that he has decided, but then we pull out, and then what? You've got the Iranian regime that is wounded, but still largely intact, according to Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence. What happens then when they're still in charge? They're still going to be trying to wreak havoc all around the world.
Every single day this war is waged, the world becomes an inherently more dangerous place. We're helping our enemies, like Russia, get more money by lifting sanctions. We're helping Iran have more money by lifting sanctions. You know more about Iraq than me, obviously, but I did some research. Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq, 3 times the military, and twice the population. So I see 2 likely scenarios in which this plays out. Either Trump does go boots on the ground, which he's being kind of weird about, but he's currently sending troops to the Middle East, so we don't know. If he does do that, it'll be almost impossible to invade a country like Iran. The geography means that mountains are on all borders, and it would be almost an impossible invasion, which would result in thousands of troops dying. So the other scenario is that Trump backs off and looks for an off-ramp. Well, what do we get from this? We made Iran more extreme. Khamenei's 86-year-old father is now replaced by the 30-year-old younger son, who is more extreme, more radical. The moderates in this country are being purged. The IRGC is becoming more radical. So what do we get for this? Either a more radical Iranian regime that will continue to fight, or we got boots on the ground. There's no, I don't know.
Let me play what Trump said about who, if anybody.
Here's where the conversation takes a sharp turn, because what sounds like a debate about strategy suddenly becomes something much bigger: accountability. You hear this argument about how war is supposed to work in a democracy, that it's not just one person making the call, that it's meant to go through elected representatives, that there's supposed to be transparency, planning, and justification. That's the theory. But then reality hits, and it doesn't look anything like that. What you're seeing instead is a complete disconnect between the public and the people making the decisions. Voters are clearly uneasy, questioning why this is happening in the first place, and yet the political class, on both sides, seems far more interested in positioning than in actually listening. And that's the uncomfortable part most people don't want to admit, because this isn't just about one party pushing a policy. There's a broader pattern here where disagreement isn't really about whether something should happen. It's about who gets credit or control over it. One side pushes forward, the other side criticizes the process. But when you strip it down, the end result often looks the same. So when Mockler steps in and argues that this situation is making things more dangerous, he's not just throwing out a hot take. He's challenging the entire premise being sold that escalation somehow equals stability. And then comes one of the most repeated talking points you'll hear in this space: the idea that this threat has been looming for decades, that this is all part of a long-standing problem that finally needed to be dealt with. Sounds convincing, until you actually think about it. Because if something has been framed as a constant danger for that long, the real question becomes, why does it suddenly require this level of action now? What changed? What's different this time? That's where the argument starts to fall apart. And there's the part nobody on that side really wants to engage with: the consequences. Not the theoretical ones, but the real-world reactions that follow when a country is pushed into a corner. Because history is very clear on this: when force is used without a clear and stable endgame, it doesn't calm things down. It tends to trigger the exact kind of instability it claims to prevent. And that's the core of Mockler's point. It's not just about whether the threat exists, it's about whether the response is actually making anyone safer, or just creating a new set of problems that didn't exist before.
Their leaders are all gone. The next set of leaders are all gone. And the next set of leaders are mostly gone. And now nobody wants to be a leader over there anymore. We're having a hard time. We want to talk to them, and there's nobody to talk to. We have nobody to talk to. And you know what? We like it that way.
Is that really the plan, Hogan? No one to talk to? How does this war end then?
Well, I mean, look, I think Donald Trump has been pretty obvious on what he wanted to accomplish on the front end of this, and I think he's done a pretty good job executing that. The military, for all of its incredible lethality, has been showcased as one of the most surgical, strategic entities on the face of the planet with what they've been able to accomplish under Donald Trump's administration. This operation, no different. As Donald Trump has pointed out many times, not only did he completely eradicate any potential for Iran to create a nuclear weapon, he also destroyed their ballistic missile capability, which of course is vital to safety and security around the globe, but also in that region. In addition, he has prevented them now from carrying out other terrorist activities through proxies around the globe too. Not to mention the fact, destroyed their Navy. So this administration has done things that both Republican and Democrat presidents have talked about for a long time. Both Republican and Democrat candidates for president, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, all said Iran can't get a nuclear weapon. Also, Barack Obama said that as well. Who's going to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon? Donald Trump has done that here. And I would argue, antithetical to this one here, this world is a whole lot safer without a nuclear-capable Iran than ever before.
I mean, gas prices are spiking, oil prices are spiking. It's not safer for people.
That's a different conversation to have. You're talking about safety and security around the globe. This president, not only
wait a minute,
in
safety
the
and
first
security
term,
around the globe. Is Russia getting more money secure? Is Iran getting more money, making us more secure? Yes or no?
All right. In the first administration, this president was able to get peace deals in the Middle East.
We're talking about now. He's starting wars
and
now.
In this administration, he's preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
8 months ago.
That's better for the entire,
8 months ago,
Are we
world.
safer because of this war, in your view?
In some ways, I'll be very balanced about it. In some ways, their military capability has been degraded. I'm sure they're on the run, and so in some ways. But in other ways, I think we're less safe because the economies are more uncertain. And I want to give the president some due here. And, you know, I'm often very critical of the president. He said something there people should listen to. He was looking for a secularist to do a deal with, and they killed all the secularists. And so the question is, at what point did that happen, and when did it happen, and when was that divergence? Because it sort of feels like the Israelis killed the secularists in terms of what the president is saying. So we're safer in some ways. I'll give Hogan some credit for that. But I would say that generally this didn't need to happen. I don't think anybody around the president thought it needed to happen. And it was reported that Bessent, Gabbard, Vance were all put in the Situation Room and away from Mar-a-Lago. So there was dissent inside of his own administration in terms of the war. And if I could just ask Hogan a question, you guys campaigned on no more forever wars. And so this is the definition of a forever war. So
and might I just add to that?
He
explicitly said in the campaign that his opponent would start a war with Iran.
Sure.
And then he started a war with Iran. So you can say, of course, like he said, like every other president has said, Iran should never have a nuclear weapon. But he was the only person who explicitly argued to the American people that they should elect him because the other guy or woman was going to start a war. And then he did the exact same thing.
What he said was he wanted no more stupid wars, and he wanted no more long-term protracted wars.
He also said Kamala Harris was going to start a war.
This is neither one of those two things.
You probably don't remember
He literally
this,
said no
but
new wars,
He said
dude.
Kamala Harris was going to start a war
Abby?
with Iran.
Sure.
he said Obama was going to start one in 2013.
He said Obama was going to start a war. Yeah.
I don't like to tell my age, but I'm 58 years old. And
You're a spring chicken.
47 years of my life. For 47 years of my life, George H. Bush, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, George W. Bush have said to me that, you know, Iran's a threat. Iran is a threat. And yes, we are safer today than we were prior to this regime being gone. Right now, what President Trump needs to do is
The regime is not gone.
The regime is not gone.
The regime is going to be gone.
How?
He is
There's 300,000
defending this
IRGC
regime.
members who will die
Air
to the very
Force
last one.
Gone. Radars gone.
The Air Force
Marines
is not the regime.
Gone.
One person is not the
But
regime.
we know that actually isn't true because I had.
What do you mean it's not
I
true?
had Israelis in my office today, and they're getting bombarded in Tel Aviv. Every 90 minutes, they're taking their kids out of their apartments and putting them in a bomb
let me
shelter.
finish my
So
point.
They're not 100% gone. I hear what the president's saying, but I'm just telling you what's happening on the ground.
Okay, we're very close to them being gone, and they're going to be gone. This guy, Trump is not going to stop here. He is not good. He is not the guy to back off
For
and say
47 years, Iran has been a threat. I agree. I would like to see
100%.
nothing more than the dismantling of the Iranian
and is no
regime.
longer a threat today.
That's not true. That is not true. I wish there was some way that two leaders could maybe negotiate and we could have more oversight over their nuclear capabilities to minimize it. I wish there was some sort of deal.
presidents with this guy.
And which one had a deal? Obama had a deal.
He
that
gave him
Obama,
$6 billion.
It was their own money. What are you talking about?
Can I just say
ask Margaret?
Okay, $6 billion.
And this is where the conversation completely unravels. Because once you strip away the talking points, what you're left with is a mix of recycled claims, half-explained history, and a whole lot of confidence that doesn't quite match reality. You hear one of the panelists casually repeat that familiar line, that massive sum of money supposedly given to Iran like it's some kind of smoking gun. But here's the problem. That claim only works if you leave out the part that actually matters. Those funds weren't a gift. They were assets that had already belonged to Iran, frozen for years, and then released as part of an agreement. That context always seems to disappear when the argument is being made, because once you include it, the entire accusation loses its punch. And that's what makes this exchange so telling, because instead of engaging with the full picture, the defense leans on simplified narratives that sound strong on the surface but don't hold up under scrutiny. And when someone like Mockler tries to push back or add that missing context, the conversation suddenly moves on, almost like there's no interest in clarifying, only in repeating. Then you've got the contradiction that's impossible to ignore. On one hand, there's this confident claim that this isn't some reckless or drawn-out conflict. On the other hand, even insiders are quietly acknowledging that this could stretch on far longer than anyone wants to admit. And that gap between the public messaging and the private expectations should raise serious questions, because if there's no clear endpoint, no defined outcome, then what exactly is the strategy? And this is where things get even more revealing. The moment economic consequences are brought into the conversation, rising costs, pressure on everyday people, it gets brushed aside like it's irrelevant. But that dismissal doesn't make the issue disappear. It just highlights a bigger problem, the tendency to separate security decisions from their real-world impact. As if they exist in different worlds, they don't. Everything is connected. And when decisions on this scale are made, the ripple effects don't stay contained. They hit households, markets, and entire economies. So the real question isn't just about military outcomes or political wins. It's about impact. What actually changes for the average person? What risks increase? What pressures grow? And are those trade-offs even being acknowledged honestly? Because at the end of the day, it's easy to frame something as a strategic success in a debate setting. It's much harder to explain the long-term consequences when those decisions start affecting real lives in real time. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think this approach makes things more stable, or does it create more uncertainty down the line? Are you convinced by the arguments being made, or do they feel like they're missing key pieces of the puzzle? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've made it this far, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more breakdowns like this.